All right, let's get right into it. For over 100 years now, there's been this small clay disc sitting in a museum in Crete. It's covered in these strange, unknown symbols. And get this, every linguist, every codebreaker, even AI has tried to read it. And every single one of them has failed. The craziest part? We don't even know what language we're looking at.
Think about that for a second. For nearly 4 millennia, this object, small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, has held its silence. It has defied every single attempt to unlock its secrets. It's like a constant taunt to every expert who's ever tried to crack it.
But the real kicker, the thing that makes this so mind-bending, isn't just about what it says. It's about how it was made. It hints at a piece of technology so far ahead of its time, it could actually force us to question a huge part of human history as we know it.
You know, we're pretty good at cracking codes. We figured out Egyptian hieroglyphs thanks to the Rosetta Stone. We decoded Linear B, the ancient script of the Mycenaeans. We've solved some seriously tough puzzles from the past. But the Phaistos disk? Nope. It's just sitting there, all by itself in the unsolved pile. It's the one that got away.
Okay, so the fact that we even have this thing to puzzle over is kind of a miracle in itself. Its survival story is just as weird as the symbols on it. It basically went through hell, and that's the only reason it's still here.
So picture this. It's 1908. An Italian archaeologist, Luigi Pernia, is digging through the ruins of this ancient Minoan palace. He's in some dusty old basement room, and there it is, just lying face down in the dirt. And it's surrounded by ash and burned bone. A pretty clear sign that something catastrophic happened right after it was put there. And here's the wild part. The disc was never supposed to last. It was just soft, unbaked clay. It should have crumbled to dust ages ago. But the massive fire that wiped out the entire palace? Well, that fire acted like a giant oven. It baked the clay solid, turning it into permanent terracotta. So the very disaster that destroyed its civilization is the only reason we have this message today. How's that for irony?
All right, let's look at the object itself. It's about 6 inches across, kind of like a CD. It's covered in symbols that spiral out on both sides. In total, there are 242 little pictures, but they're all made from a repeating set of just 45 unique characters. But here is the one detail you absolutely have to remember, the one that changes everything. These symbols weren't carved or scratched in, they were stamped.
And among those 45 stamps, there's one that shows up more than any other. It's this head in profile, wearing a really distinct helmet with feathers or plumes coming out of the top. For a long time, people just thought, weird helmet. But then, they found a connection that is, frankly, pretty chilling.
Yeah, this is where the story gets dark. That plumed head is a near-perfect match for the headdresses worn by a mysterious and violent group from ancient history known only as the Sea Peoples.
So who were the Sea Peoples? Well, we don't know a ton, but what we do know is they were bad news. They were a confederation of raiders who tore through the ancient world around 1200 BC. Toppling empires and collapsing entire civilizations. The Egyptians even carved warnings about them on their temple walls. So finding their signature symbol on a much older artifact from Crete, that is deeply unsettling.
And you can see why, right? This potential link to these Bronze Age boogeymen is why everyone is so desperate to figure this thing out. It's kicked off this massive 100-year-long academic brawl. Is it a secret code? Is it something else entirely? Or maybe it's not even real. I mean, people have thrown everything at the wall trying to make sense of it as a language. The guy who basically discovered the Minoans thought it was a sacred hymn. Others have sworn it's an early form of Greek or a military oath. One of the more recent ideas is that it's a prayer to a mother goddess. The problem is, for every single theory, there are a dozen other experts ready to tear it down. Nothing has stuck. Every attempt has failed.
So after a century of getting absolutely nowhere, some researchers started thinking outside the box. They asked a simple but revolutionary question. What if we'd been trying to read something that was never meant to be read?
And that's where you get the board game theory. The idea is that the spiral isn't a long line of text, it's a track. And the little lines dividing the symbols aren't punctuation, they're spaces on a game board. It actually looks a lot like an ancient Egyptian game called Mehen, the snake game, which was played on a spiral board. Could this entire profound mystery just be a game night artifact?
Of course, there's always the most controversial theory that the whole thing's a fake. One scholar, Jerome Eisenberg, argued that the archaeologist who found it actually made it himself to get famous. It's a juicy theory, but science kind of gets in the way.
A test called thermoluminescence dating proved the clay was fired thousands of years ago, not in some 20th century oven.
But look, all this arguing about whether it's a prayer or a game, it might be missing the single most important clue. The biggest secret isn't what it says, it's how it was made. And this is the part that could actually rewrite history books.
So let's go back to those stamps. To make the disc, someone first had to painstakingly carve 45 individual little seals, one for each symbol. Then they could just take those reusable seals and press them into the wet clay over and over again. What you get is a perfectly uniform standardized text. So let's just call that what it is, a system of individual, reusable characters that you can arrange to stamp out a text. Folks, that is the literal definition of movable type printing. Whoever made this disc didn't just have writing tools, they had a printing kit.
Now, let's put that in perspective for a second. We all learn in school that Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press in Europe around 1440 AD, and it changed the world. Well, the Phaistos disc was made around 1700 BC.
That is a technological gap of over 3,000 years. It suggests the Minoans, an ancient Bronze Age civilization, invented one of the most important technologies in human history. And then it was just gone. Completely lost to the world for 3,140 years.
Which, of course, raises the biggest question of all. The whole point of printing is mass production. So if they had this technology, where is everything else? Why have we only ever found this one single disk? Were there thousands of other documents printed on something like papyrus that just rotted away? Or was this a one-off, a brilliant invention that just became a technological dead end?
And if you're thinking, well, why don't we just run more modern tests on it? That brings us to the final and maybe the most frustrating piece of this whole puzzle. The disk sits in a museum in Crete, and for years, scientists have been asking for permission to use our new tech on it, non-destructive things like super high-res imaging or new dating analyses. But for reasons that aren't really clear, the requests have been repeatedly turned down.
So in the end, we're left with this stark choice. Is this a genuine message from a lost world, a hymn, a game, a warning that we're simply not clever enough to read yet? Or is it the most elaborate and successful hoax in the history of archaeology? For now, the disc holds its silence.